basics, acronyms, things like that to SEC law in regards to syndicating multifamily deals and keeping our asses out of jail?
So I think first and foremost, for most of, I think, your listeners and our clients, people need to decide how they're going to raise capital. And when you decide how you're going to raise capital, you have to have a fundamental understanding that when you raise capital, you're selling a security. So if I go to Heath and I go to Hutch and I say, hey guys, I'm going to let you guys in on 1/3 of this business that I have proposed to do, and I need you to put $33,000 each, so we'll have $99,000 in it. I've just sold a security. So unless I'm a licensed broker dealer or an owner in the business, and even as an owner, I have very specific things I can and can't do. If I'm not a broker dealer, I certainly can't get compensation or give compensation for it. But because I'm selling a security, while you may not have to register with the SEC, you have to file with the SEC. And for the most part, people look at two different ways in which they use the exception of not using a broker dealer, or the exemption. It's under Reg D, and they choose either 506B or 506C. And Cindy, I'm so old, I forgot the differences. Maybe you can chime in.
So 506B is limited to 35 what's called sophisticated investors and an unlimited number of accredited investors. And sophisticated means that the 35 that are allowed understand what they're investing in. Additionally, it is limited to investors that you have a pre-existing relationship with. Pre-existing means pre-existing before you actually get under contract on a commercial multifamily deal. The limitations in 506B are that you cannot generally solicit or advertise, and that's where the pre-existing relationship becomes important. 506C, you can advertise. You're limited to accredited only investors, net worth over, as an individual, $1 million, a couple.
Still $1 million.
Additionally, you can advertise, but you have to verify their accredited status in 506C. So the burden is on you as the sponsor to determine what their net worth and income is, versus 506B. They fill out an investor questionnaire, and unless you have reason to believe they're stating something fraudulent, you can rely on their statements as far as their sophistication or net worth.
One of the things that appeals to most, especially newer investors, is 506B. Because the first thing everybody ever talks about is you want to go do something. It's like you're going to go sell insurance and you're with an insurance company. The first thing they tell you to do is go hit your friends and family first. You know, it's the same idea with raising capital. We all do it. And I'm on my 5th or 6th fund. And even to this day, I still bring friends and family in, but I do 506C. So friends and family have to be accredited investors. But initially, you always go to friends and family. And many times your friends and family don't meet the accredited status, but you already have the pre-existing relationship, and they may have 50 grand or 100 grand or whatever your minimum is, 25 grand, and they'll put it in. So as long as you keep it at 35 or less of people that aren't accredited, you know, that's fine. And if you think about it, if you could raise 50 grand from 35 people, lawyer math, 1.75 million, you know, that'll go ahead and get you a $5 million property. In most cases, we're in COVID times right now, so that may get you a $4 million property, or 3.5 with all the additional reserve requirements that we may have. But that's a great way for people to start off. The other thing, people are like, well, 506C, I should do a 506C. I can advertise to the world. I can do a podcast. I can be on this podcast right now and say, I've got 123 Main Street. I'm raising $100K per person. You're going to get X% return. Call me now. There's nothing illegal about that, provided that I can give the return I say I can, or I'm somewhere in that neighborhood. But there's nothing illegal about that because it's a 506C. So why wouldn't everybody do that? Well, one, the reason everybody wouldn't do that is in order to do a 506C and advertise to the world, to people you don't know, okay, you have to have a track record. Because at that point, people looking to invest in you don't know you. So they're going to look more towards your track record. Then they'll go back and look at you, and presumably you have a team when you're doing a 506C. Those are normally a little bit bigger raises. But what we caution clients about all the time is the requirement that you have to verify they're accredited. Under a 506B, you can take as many accredited investors as you want, but because you're not advertising to the world, you don't have that same requirement by the SEC. It's up to the accredited investor to fill out what's called an investor questionnaire. They go through and check the boxes and say, yeah, I meet all the requirements. You as the sponsor, you have no liability whatsoever. So you're relying on them. Okay. The difference is the SEC says if you're going to advertise to the world and none of these people know you, and you're going to get this exemption where you can just advertise to whomever, your obligation is to verify that they're an accredited investor. So now you've become essentially a mortgage broker. You've got to get all this documentation. You've got to go through all these steps. You now have the liability if they're not an accredited investor and the return doesn't come out to where it's supposed to be, then you're going to have an issue. We caution people about the differences. It's great. I only do 506Cs personally, but I use the third party to independently verify whether they're accredited or not. It costs me $65. It's the best $65 per investor I've ever spent. I'm not going to mention the name on here because that's promoting a third party. There are 5 or 6 that have been approved by the SEC. We highly recommend our clients use. It's so much easier than having to keep up with it yourself, and they maintain the accredited status. So they check in on them every either 6 months or 12 months to verify they still meet that accreditability.